Hello everyone and welcome back finally to Berlin Noir. It has been quite some time, over 2 months actually, since I last released a Berlin Noir episode. The miniseries Pripyat being a bit not too many and taking a little longer than I expected, but here's just a few shots of the city to just kind of get back in the feeling and of what we had built previously, and also for all the new subscribers. I know there's actually quite a lot of you coming over thanks to Imperator, his channel. He did a little shout out on a video, top 10 under subscribed channels or something along those lines. So thank you very much to you and welcome all new subscribers. And yeah, so for today, the very first episode back into the series, we are going to be building the old Tempelhof Airfield. So this is going to be a pretty fun build. I did enjoy it, and there's basically the entire airport is custom buildings, and not what I've done previously with, at least in the Pripyat series, where I've done custom buildings with procedural objects. But this time around, I'm making these buildings out of what is actually a modular UK like home pack or something like that. I actually saw something like this where someone on Instagram built a very small little, more or less air traffic control tower type thing, kind of similar to what I'm building here, although this one's a little bigger. But he built it out of the same pack, and I really liked in the first place, I actually thought it was an asset on the workshop, so I was looking through trying to find the thing, and I couldn't, because it wasn't actually an asset. It was this thing, just these little modular walls and roofs. So as you can see, it's maybe a tad bit. I mean, it is meant for, like I said, it's for UK homes. So it was a little weird trying to figure out exactly how I wanted to turn this into a airport terminal, since this building that I'm building here is the main terminal. I guess if you want to call it a terminal, it's not really a terminal since they didn't really have those back then. But I'm just going to call it a terminal because I don't really know what else to call it. But yeah, so this is the main building, the main terminal. And yeah, so this particular building was the first to be laid for this airport here. And that was in 1927. So not too far before this series takes place in 1929. And based on the pictures and the one aerial view that I've always been using for the city, it was hard to see exactly when the airport, or more so the airfield, since there wasn't actually runways or anything like that, when it was mostly completed. Since I saw pictures from like 1927 when it was being built, and then the aerial view that I have, which is in 1928. I'll pop a picture up right here. You can see that there's like that little tarmac area, I guess. And based on what I build later on in this video, it'll be larger than that, since in 1928, I guess the tarmac at least wasn't finished yet, even though the terminal area as well as the two little hangars, those were finished, or at least appeared to be finished. But yeah, so I more or less, I think what I built was more accurate to 1930. At least I did see the one picture that I found, which I'll pop up right here, I believe is from 1930. And this one has pretty much, you can see the background, the tarmac going out a little bit further. And I also saw a planning, or I don't know if it's for like a city planning or if it's just a map made later on, or who knows what. But that actually had the tarmacs all the way built out, and that one didn't have a year or anything. But actually, that was useful since I was able to make the tarmac area, I guess the taxiways, if that's what they're called back then. But I was able to make that a little bit more accurate, and it looks pretty cool once we get there. But for now, the terminal, as you see, is kind of coming together. Just using these walls to just digital objecting it all the way around. They weren't these little props, I guess, or they actually were buildings, but they're more or less props, but they weren't super PO friendly, at least to start out. I had to get used to, like, when you customize any sort of PO object and you extrude all the vertices, it totally depends on how the assets were created, because sometimes just what seems disconnected in an asset will be connected, and it's kind of hard to explain. But the same thing, if you recall from a previous episode of Pripyat, when I was moving around the cranes, where I was able to shift the actual crane part around without actually moving the rest of the asset. That's a nice optimized asset that can be used with PO well. Whereas this here, which I cut out the instances, I believe, at least the vast majority of them, because it was kind of annoying. But when I was trying to customize it and move around the vertices, trying to move up the walls or whatever it may be, for whatever reason, like the very four corners, I think, of the actual building were I really honestly don't know how to explain it, but basically when I would try and raise up the building, like, it would kind of just screw up the texture, and it was odd. I hadn't seen anything quite like that before. And yeah, like I said, it's kind of hard to explain, so you probably don't really know exactly what I'm talking about. But basically the point is that it took me quite a while to actually get this building going, because I mean, it was completely new assets. I never worked with these before, so I wasn't quite sure what I had available and what windows and doors and stuff I wanted to use. But I think it turned out pretty good, actually. This might be one instance in where, yeah, I cut out the difficult part. But that's where I was just trying to remove the top part of that piece so it wouldn't cover the window there. But anyways, so this little terminal area here, which you might have seen in the picture, but it had like some walkway coming out from the main, I guess, building, which was covered with another little canopy, kind of like that. And it went out to this center building here. Not quite sure what it is. Maybe it was the actual waiting area rather than the actual building itself. Because, I mean, back in the early 20th century, 1929, or really even into the early 30s, air travel was certainly not for the average person. And this particular airfield on this building, which I'll build later, is covered with like restaurant tables and chairs, which kind of looked fancy almost. And that's because people would actually come out here and just watch the planes and apparently eat a nice lunch and see the occasional, I assume, pretty rare plane come and land, since there weren't too many airlines operating back then in general. But out of this airport, I believe, at least the main one, if not the only one, it was the Lufthansa, which is actually not the same as the Lufthansa that exists today. The original one went folded after World War II, and then another company completely separate, though they just took the name of the previous Lufthansa, and then now we have the one that exists today. But just random fact that I came across when I was trying to find some information and pictures on the airport. But yeah, that asset there that I used, was it from Milwaukee, I believe? I actually don't remember. I think it's some sort of train asset station, something like that. I don't remember. But I saw it on the workshop once, and I was like, yeah, probably might use this eventually one day in the future. And sure enough, I needed some sort of little tower type thing there, and the clock certainly was nice as well, and it fits there pretty decently, I'd say. But yeah, so getting back into this series, initially I didn't run into any problems like when I reloaded the save game, because the previous time I did a mini series, the very first time when I built Mont Saint Michel, and I reloaded Berlin Noir after the Mont Saint Michel was finished, and there were some small things like a certain type of road just disappeared across the map. I guess the creator took the asset off the workshop for whatever reason. But other things like buildings disappearing as well. And back then I also was using some of the vanilla European buildings, which I'm pretty sure I've since got rid of all of them. But some of those were disappearing. I don't know why. But this time around I opened the save and I was so delighted to see there was nothing wrong. And I built some stuff. I'm working on this episode. And then the next day or whatever, when I came in and reloaded the save game, I had all the surface painted concrete or pavement texture. So with the surface painter mod or the brush, whatever it's called. But all those surfaces were completely gone in the city. So I didn't do anything. I just exited out, restarted my computer, and was like, please be okay when I load back in. And it wasn't. So I was like, all right, so I'll have to redo all the pavement texture, or not textures, but just all the repaint all with the paintbrush, all the pavement textures, as well as probably some gravel and the ruin textures as well, depending on, where it is that I've used in the city. But so I did that, not entirely, because that's pretty much impossible. I mean, I'm probably going to be fixing that for several episodes, 3, 4, 5 episodes in the future. Just because, I mean, unless I go block by block and look at every single corner, I'm not going to catch everything. But I just did the main areas, at least the areas where you could zoom out and see, wow, look at that just open area. It just looked weird. So I was able to fix those quickly. But yeah, so if you see that in the future, or if you saw that in the cinematics at the very start of the video, that's going to be a recurring project for me, just trying to fix that. And yeah, I'm not really sure what happened, especially considering that when I loaded the save game the first time, it was completely fine, and then when I got back, it was all screwed up. So that's one of the many reasons I don't like working on 2 large projects at the same time, like I know some YouTubers do. I always run into issues. I really don't know why. Because like when all the way back at the beginning of 2020, when I first started this series, and I wanted, or at least I planned on, just trying to go back and forth between my original series, which was Las Colinas, my Californian city, and then this one as well. But then this one took off pretty well and got a whole lot more views on the very first episode than I had gotten on pretty much all my other Las Colinas videos combined. So I was like, all right, I'll do this for a while, and then eventually I'll get back to Las Colinas. But one day I decided to try and open up the old Las Colinas save, and it was just totally screwed up. Like, I don't even remember exactly what was wrong, but I remember just being like glitches everywhere. I don't know if I've occasionally opened save games where you just have like that blue, what's it called? But basically like if you put 2 networks, say 2 roads right smack next to each other, and you raise one up a bit and then lower one down or whatever, and you have that just blue nothingness more or less, where there's no texture, no anything, no ground, whatever. That's what I got like across a lot of that city. And also, for whatever reason, the theme didn't save, so I was trying to redo that, and And basically, I was like, yeah. So ever since then, I basically pretty much vowed to never attempt to do another big series at the same time as my main series. And Pripyat definitely pushed that a bit, considering, like I said, I believe it was over 2 months since episode 23 of Berlin Noir to the release of this one. So that's quite a long time, not just because of, worrying about any sort of glitches and issues and such, but also it's hard to go that long or go that long while working on a completely different series. So building in Pripyat with 80s themed assets and obviously Soviet themed assets, and then going back to something in the 1929 with completely different style and with the German assets. So I have to relearn basically all the different buildings and get refamiliarized with basically what I have at my disposal to use in this game. And also there was a number of nice assets that were released. Basically, like the second I released the first episode of Pripyat, I remember seeing a few good assets that are worked or meant for this period in Germany, or just general German assets that would work in here. And one recently, at least, was the Noir Museum on Museum Island, which I haven't added yet. I might save that for an episode. I'm considering doing an episode where I kind of fix some of the earlier stuff that I've done in this series, back when I wasn't, or basically when this was the very first time I've ever did a German city. And so there's still, if you go back in the early episodes, there's still a few areas in the city where if I were to redo it today or do it for the first time today, that would be like 10 times better. So I've considered doing that soon. So if you want to see that sometime soon, let me know, because I definitely do want to do that. Because it's always best to improve all your areas of your city. And when you're building a large city like this, and as having a YouTube channel here, having all these new assets be released constantly on the workshop, sometimes you just have to take all those new assets and be like, all right, I have to go back to however much that I've built before and just improve it really, or fix it, or whatever it may be. Because, like for instance, with the Noir Museum on Museum Island, with that episode, I forget what I used for that particular building, but it was something that vaguely, looked vaguely like the actual real life building. But when I, just out of curiosity, I went over there to look at the new asset to see if it would fit in there, and of course it doesn't at all. It's quite a lot bigger, so there's definitely going to be some either using PO to scale down the asset, or I don't know. We'll see. But I guess, yeah, that's enough of all that talk. There kind of went a while without talking about what I was doing on screen, but I figured it was more or less self-explanatory. But what we just did now was work on the tarmac area, and I skipped, of course, where I lay that pavement texture. It was a ploppable surface, which the reason I outlined the whole tarmac with that path, and then the reason I went on using this ploppable pavement texture was because I didn't want to have the stone pavement theme that I have for, the entire city, like the one right there, the little whitish stones. I didn't want to have on the entire run or taxiway tarmac area, because that's not realistic. Even they did have, some sort of pavement. It wasn't stones for this. And also just to break up the monotony, because that had been a lot of surface area using just that same texture. So I decided to use a ploppable surface, and I outlined the tarmac with that path, since the path is ever so slightly raised above the ground. So that way you can just, when you put the ploppable surface, it goes underneath the path. So if you want to do any turns or curves or anything like that, such as I have with this tarmac area, then I don't have to worry about trying to make the ploppable surface, bend smoothly or whatever it may be. I can just hide it underneath the path. But so now what we're doing here is the hangar. So for the hangar, I actually got a different, it's this from the same creator for the UK modular housing, but it's a different textured wall. So for the building that we built prior, for the terminal building, that was brick. And then this one, I didn't want to use the same texture for two reasons. One, just I didn't want to have the exact same texture, two buildings right next to each other. But also because the hangar, I'm pretty sure, probably was built partly out of metal. And at least based on the pictures and what I know of most hangars today, at least. I'm not sure what they were like back then. But looking at the pictures, it looks like it was probably metal. And I initially wanted to try and make, the hangar out of metal or find a real actual hangar on the workshop, but there was nothing that was shaped like this or anything that wasn't really modern. So what I decided to do was just use this textured wall from that modular pack. And yeah, if it looks fine in the end. If you're a airplane or airport enthusiast, or this building for whatever reason, then you'll be like, that's not right. But for the vast majority of you guys out there, I'm sure this is plenty good. And yeah, like I said, it turns out pretty good. But I did think, based on the workshop pictures of this wall color versus the brick wall color, I could have sworn this one was quite a bit lighter in color, but I'm pretty sure it's actually darker, or at least with the LUT settings and lighting settings I have in my game. For whatever reason, it's just appears to be somewhat darker than the brick. Yeah, I don't know. But there was another hangar on the opposite side of the terminal. So there's basically, so two little hangars on both sides of the terminal, which I was going to actually make another one, not from scratch. I was probably going to copy this one and then just make it a little longer, because the other one was actually a tad bit longer, probably maybe for cargo planes, or instead of maybe this one's for passenger planes. I'm not entirely sure what the difference was, but as you can see, this episode is already pretty lengthy, so cutting out as much as I already did, I just decided, there's no way I'm gonna make it any, add to this building on the other side. So I just end up completely copying it over, which is fine because it's a slight difference. And again, unless you for some odd reason are really keen of this old airport and have seen, looked at pictures and maps of this, then no one's gonna know. And but another thing, the planes that I'm using for the map here, I only have two that I found that I'm using, and I'm pretty sure those are the only ones that kind of fit this era. One being that plane there, the blue and yellow one, which is actually, I think it's a KLM plane. So maybe it says KLM on it. I don't really remember. I don't think it does. So that's not a big deal. I don't think the KLM was doing flights from Amsterdam to Berlin, because I actually did look that up to see, and I didn't see that they were. I believe it was mostly just in the Netherlands and London and I think France. But anyways, so here we skip over to, or no, this is still the original. Yes, this is still the original hangar. In a second, we kind of just jump over and but anyways, so just to finish off the hangar, I just add this texture here. I believe it's a vanilla decal, actually, just like some cracks or whatever, just to add something to it so it doesn't look too perfect. There's going to be, of course, some wear and tear to it. But now we are at the other side. So this is not the initial hangar that we were working on. This is the one on the opposite side of the terminal. But yeah, so this one here is where I use the other plane. And this one here is actually... this is the one that I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm going to use this one or not. But this is actually an American plane from World War II. C-47 Douglas, I believe. But this is like one of the iconic, like it was flying over D-Day. And also a similar model to the ones that would later take part in the Berlin airlift, where you have that pretty famous photo of these planes lined up at the newer version of the airport, which the airport did basically what I built in this episode was completely destroyed, I believe, or actually it might not have been destroyed, but the airport was at least expanded in the mid 1930s and early 1940s to make room for larger passenger capacities, but also for, you know, Hitler's vision for Germany and all that stuff. But anyways, so we're pretty much close to the end of we're at the pretty much end of the episode. Just working on some detailing there, which I cut out most of it because it was repetitive, but just drawing those dirt runways more or less, which I don't think actually existed in real life based on the photos I saw, but it made sense to kind of designate an area that looked like that's where planes take off and land. But yeah, so this is going to be it. Just finishing off with adding all the tables that I mentioned at the start of the episode where people would, you know, go out to lunch or whatever, or maybe a hot date. I don't know. I don't know if you would take your date to an airport, but yeah, this is going to be it for the episode. And so yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll probably be working around this area still, at least for the next episode. And I think I'm going to try my hand at making some allotments. So some garden allotments, which were around here, since this is actually, you know, pretty far outside the heart of Berlin, at least especially back then. There's basically just allotments, some small homes, and some farmland further south of this. But yeah, so that'll be in the next episode. And so yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. And if you did, I'd appreciate a thumbs up on the video. And if you're new, go ahead and subscribe. And yeah, so I will see you all in the next video of Berlin Noir.